Hello and welcome to a special leadership series that we're running here on People, Politics and Planet. I'm your host, Joanne Roberts. I'm also interim leader of the Green Party of Canada. Now, as many of you know, the Green Party is in the midst of a leadership contest right now. 9 people are seeking the leadership, which was left vacant when Elizabeth May stepped down in November. She stepped down as leader after 14 years. Fortunately for us, she stayed on as an MP and is serving as our parliamentary leader. Here on People, Politics and Planet, we're doing interviews with each of the 9 contestants so you can get to know them a bit better. Today, I'm having a conversation with Dimitri Lascaris. Dimitri is a lawyer. There are actually 3 lawyers in this contest. He specializes in class action and pro bono legal work. He is currently based in Montreal, but in 2015, he ran for the Green Party in the London West riding in London, Ontario. Hello, Dimitri.
Hi, Joanne. You did that so well, one would think you were once a professional journalist.
You would think maybe, right? I'm good at reading the script.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's good to have you here. I was looking over your bio, and one of the things that is often quoted in stories about you is that your parents immigrated to Canada from Greece. Your wife is the daughter of Algerian immigrants. I'm wondering, how does that shape you as a leadership candidate?
Well, that is true. And in fact, the circumstances in which my parents came here were quite difficult. They left Greece they were in their late teens at that point in time, and neither of them had even 1 year of high school education. They had really no ability to speak English and no established family here. And they were brought over here with the sponsorship of the Canadian government as part of a program, which, as far as I can tell, was really designed to bring unskilled laborers, as we sometimes refer to them, from Southern Europe to come and do jobs here that others didn't necessarily want to do. So they took a ship from Greece and arrived in Halifax and slowly meandered down to Southern Ontario, where they ended up getting a job in a McCormick's factory making cookies. And eventually they scrounged together enough money from doing work like that they did what all Greek immigrants at the time did. They started a family diner. And I basically grew up in a family diner as a kid. And I was fortunate enough to actually, get to law school eventually. I did have to take on quite a bit of debt in order to get through 7 years of university studies. But, that did enable me ultimately to have a very good quality of life relative to most Canadians. And I feel very, very blessed by that. But I've never forgotten where I came from. And it informs, everything that I think about politics, about the structure of our society, about our relationships to our fellow human beings. I think overwhelmingly success is due in large part to good fortune, and people who do not find themselves in situations of where they can actually fulfill their potential, simply in many cases, in the vast majority of cases, haven't been as fortunate as our fellow citizens. And so we have an obligation to ensure that they have that basic ability to fulfill their own dreams in the way that I was able to do.
Now I'm going to deal with an issue that I'm sure has come up on the campaign trail with you, and it's actually when you and I first met. You had a very public split with the party in 2016 over issues around Palestinian rights, boycotts, sanctions against Israel. And at the time you left the party after the issue was settled from a policy point of view, but then you left the party, you joined the NDP, and now you've returned to the Green Party. So I'm going to give you a chance here to say, what do you say to members when they raise this issue?
Well, it is a very good question. It's one that I am often asked. And I would point out that we have a number of candidates in this party who, in this race, who have devoted much less of their political lives to the Green Party than I have. So before I answer your question, I would want to point out that the first party I ever joined was the Green Party of Canada. I joined it in 2007, and I did so after reading the 4th report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which greatly alarmed me. I then became the CEO of London West, and as you mentioned, I ran. This is the only party for which I've ever run. It's the only party in which I've ever held any kind of an official position, shadow cabinet member. So I think over the course of my entire political activism, I have shown really a strong devotion to this party. But what happened in 2016 was a couple of things. The struggle that you talked about over this resolution, which I think with your very capable assistance and that of Paul Manley, ended up being resolved successfully. nonetheless created strains for me, and I actually had to exit the shadow cabinet as a result of that. And the way in which the policy, which I'm very proud of to this day, and I don't want to change one word of, I think it's a tremendous accomplishment for all of us, every single person involved in that debate. I think that it wasn't defended in the way that I would have liked. And so those two things, my exit from the shadow cabinet and the fact it wasn't defended in the way I would have liked, caused me to wonder whether I might be more at home in another party. And I switched to the NDP at that particular time because another thing happened, which is that Nikki Ashton, someone who I would have very much liked to see become the leader of the NDP because of her commitment to Indigenous rights, because of her rather, I think, progressive policies, she was running for the leadership. And so I decided that I would try to support that, and was quite disappointed when it didn't happen. And I would have to say that the leader who ultimately emerged, Jagmeet Singh, is not someone whom I can support. And so ultimately, I was kind of in the political wilderness for a few months, and then decided that really this is my home. I came back home, and I'm very happy to be here. And whatever the outcome of this race may be, I want to do everything I can to help take this party to the next level.
Now, just sort of as a follow-up to that, and then we'll move on to sort of getting to know your background more. But what would you say when people might jump to the conclusion that you're running for leadership on the sole Palestinian-Israeli issue? Are you a one-issue candidate?
Well, again, a question that I'm sometimes asked, and I can tell you that if I were committed to that, if that were the singular objective of my work, then I would not run for this or any other political party, because no one can be the leader of this party or any other political party and devote him or herself to one issue above all others. I am here because of the pressing nature of the climate emergency before us, because of societal inequalities, because of extreme wealth, because of a system that I think, an economic system, has run amok and is characterized by an astonishing degree of inhumanity. Those are the things that motivate me to run for this party. And, the Palestinian issue will always be one that I will remain committed to. And if anybody asks me, what is your position on this issue, I will continue to say that the state of Israel, like all human rights violators, should be subjected to some form of accountability to bring an end to the human rights violations. So my position will not change, but prioritizing that issue above the others that are overwhelming concern to our constituents is not something that I have any desire to do, and I wouldn't be running if that were my desire.
So let's go back to the time when your parents were running a diner. That's something you have in common with Elizabeth May. She also had parents who came to this country and started a restaurant. What did you want to be when you were a child? What did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be a writer. In fact, I dropped out of university after 3 years, and thought that I could, go live on a mountain in Switzerland. I took off. I did 2 full-time jobs after third year for a period of about 4 months. I scrounged together a few $1,000s, and I just got on a plane and I went to Europe without any particular plan. I didn't intend to come back. What I wanted to do was sort of live on a mountain in Switzerland and write the great novel. So I actually wrote one. It wasn't good. It went nowhere. So I also got a taste in it. I remember it was very difficult. I remember one night I couldn't get into a youth hostel. I arrived in Rome very, very late, and I ended up standing up in a telephone booth. And I remember waking up and feeling this bone-chilling cold. And I had a lot of experiences like that on that trip because I was trying to stretch out my money as long as possible. And I got a taste of what hardship was like. I hadn't experienced that level of hardship before. So I decided I needed to come back, complete my education, and get a job.
So we can be very grateful in Canada that you're a failed writer.
I hope it works out for everybody. But yeah, I am a failed writer.
Well, let's talk about your goals for the party then. And let's start with a very practical one. How do you propose to increase the number of seats the party can win?
I would say, primarily that I think we need to start to appeal to constituencies who have not looked at the Green Party as their first choice in the past. So one that is very important to me is workers and organized labor. On the campaign trail and prior to, throwing my hat into the ring, I heard a number of times people who were progressive in their orientation, that they viewed the Green Party as being anti-labor. I don't think that's true. I don't think we were ever anti-labor, certainly not in our core policies. But I think that we can do a much better job of becoming the champion of workers. I feel as though we've ceded that ground to the NDP, whose leadership has done a terrible job of defending the rights and interests of workers. And so I put forward a workers' rights platform in the last 2 weeks, which has some very assertive proposals, all of which would, of course, be subject to member approval, about workers' interests and rights, like a $20 an hour minimum wage at the federal level, like a legal requirement that workers have representation on the boards of corporations. Another one that I feel very strongly about is having a maximum spread between worker compensation and executive compensation. And I'm being so assertive as to call for a 10-to-1 spread. I don't understand why CEOs of public companies make 150, 200 times what the workers make. In the course of my legal career, I've represented CEOs and I've cross-examined CEOs. I've sued CEOs. I can tell you from my personal interactions with these heavy-hitting CEOs that they're really not contributing more to the corporation's overall profitability than those of the people who actually make the goods and services upon which the corporation relies for its profitability. So I think we need to come to terms with the fact that executive compensation is out of control and workers by and large are being underpaid in this country. So I think if we do that, if we put forward a program like that, the NDP is going to be seriously challenged to maintain its connection to the working class of this country. I think also the question of inequality, which is related, of course, to workers' rights, is one that I want to champion. And so I would be quite in favor of much higher taxation rates on the highest income earners, as high as 75%. In this country, in the United States, for much of the post-World War II period, the top marginal tax rate, few people know this, was in excess of 90% in the United States as well as Canada. So 75% is actually modest by historical standards. And I would like to see far larger wealth taxes than we've been talking about, ultimately to ensure that there is much less extreme wealth and that every single Canadian has the ability to achieve his or her potential. So with that kind of a bold progressive platform, I think that we can bring people from across the political spectrum who are of a progressive inclination in droves to the Green Party of Canada and greatly increase our presence in Parliament. And once people see, we get official party status, we have enough seats to actually turn that into legislative reform, I think people will see that this is the party that truly embodies the values of Canada, not the Liberal Party, which likes to call itself the natural governing party.
So this is a pretty competitive race with 9 contestants at this point. Do you see a point in this race where you might decide, okay, I'm not going to continue, and would you throw your support to another contestant?
Well, barring some catastrophe that I do not foresee, okay. I have every intention of going all the way.
Great.
Now, there may come a point in time at the very end of the race, once the votes have been cast, where, of course, I'll be looking at the other candidates and making a decision about who has a vision and a platform that's most similar to the one that I feel so strongly about. That may come there. That may happen, but I have every intention of being there at the finish line.
When you started this race, or certainly when you started considering running for leader, we did not have a pandemic on our hands. So once the race, was up and running, and the majority of contestants were in place, we were in the middle of COVID-19. How has that changed how you approach this?
Well, I entered the race about 4 days before we went into confinement in Quebec, where I live in Montreal, and we managed to get off 2 campaign events before this happened. David Murner came to Montreal, and I and he and one other candidate and several via Zoom participated in debates at the Université de Montréal and at McGill. And then, boom, we went into confinement. So I did not do any in-person campaigning. I'm pretty sure nobody else did, right up until about 10 days ago, which was hard. I mean, I've had Zoom calls up to here, Joanne. I'm sure you have. Not having personal interaction with people is very difficult for people to get a feel for who you are and for you to get a feel for what they want from their leader. So when the opportunity opened up for me to do in-person campaign, the other thing that I did, by the way, is I completely suspended fundraising during the economic hardship of the pandemic, and several other candidates signed on to a commitment to do that. And at the very beginning of June, because it's necessary at some point to fundraise, I revived those efforts. So 10 days ago, I embarked on a bit of a trip. I drove down to Peterborough, Ontario from Montreal. That was my first stop. And I had an in-person event in a park. And it was so refreshing to see real human beings in front of me and interact with them about the issues that matter to them. And then I swung through southwestern Ontario. And now I'm out in BC, and I've been here for about a week. And the crowds are getting a little bit larger. You can see people are very tentative. They don't know quite what to do in the current circumstances. But I think there's enough comfort level with, especially out here in BC, where they've done a fantastic job of getting the virus under control, that, you know, significant numbers of people are coming out and are engaging in really great discussions about the leadership race.
Now, one of the questions I am asking all candidates, because I'll tell you, my experience of filling in as interim leader has taught me this is not a job that you can do without support from those closest to you. So how does your family, and that can be however you define family, how does your family feel about your run for leadership?
You know, my partner, Farida, who has stuck with me for 25 years when I was a class actions lawyer, you know, when I retired from class actions law in 2016, she said to me, "You're working harder now than you did before you so-called retired."
Right.
And now it's even gone beyond that. I mean, I've not experienced this level of intensity in anything I've ever undertaken in my life. It's sometimes you know, overwhelming. And so she's really had to sort of sit back and just let me do this. It's very difficult for her. She's
Yeah.
virtually had no meaningful interaction with me other than, you know, chit chat for 5 minutes a day.
Yeah.
And I'm amazed at the level of patience she has shown. And I think she's a little bit concerned with what happens if my husband actually wins this thing, because it might even get worse. So I think she's just being very, very patient, and is you know, is learning how demanding this job actually is.
Yes.
My kids are very supportive. My daughter actually manages my campaign calendar. You know, my son is helping in various other ways, including coming to some campaign events and being my videographer. But they don't have to live with me on a day-to-day basis, so it's easier for them to be excited about all of this.
That's great. I've met your kids. They're pretty dynamic. The other thing that the party has made a real commitment to is ensuring that that the next leader of the Green Party has the ability to communicate in both French and English. And we know that there are different levels of bilingualism that the contestants are at. How about you? How is your ability to speak French?
Well, I learned French in France because when I started my legal profession, I persuaded the Wall Street firm where I was employed at the time to put me in their Paris office.
Oh,
And my wife is so I went over there, and I remember my French was so bad that I walked in, at the time I had hair, and I walked into a grocery store. I was trying to buy shampoo, but I bought toilet cleaner instead. So my French was pretty bad at the time, you know. But then over time, you really to learn any language, you have to be immersed in it. So that was a great experience for me. And then when I got married to my partner Farida 25 years ago, she's from Lyon. She was born and raised in France, and so we speak French at home about half the time. I've lived a total of about 5 years in Montreal, and so now I would say that my French is pretty good. I feel very comfortable in French, but I don't have the level of nuance that I have in the English language. I'm not at that level of sophistication, but certainly I'm perfectly comfortable having a good, strong conversation in French.
If you were chosen leader, how important would it be to you to seek a seat in the House of Commons as soon as possible? Would you go anywhere in the country if there was a by-election that you thought you could win?
Well, I would prefer, because we're so strong in BC, you know, I think the majority of the largest EDAs by membership are based out here on Vancouver Island, where I currently am. You know, and we have tremendous candidates out here who I think are on the verge of making a breakthrough. I don't think that I need to be adding my presence to the strength of the party out here in the West Coast. I would prefer to see us have, you know, the NDP had this thing they called the orange wave. I would prefer for us to ignite a green wave in Quebec, and also in Ontario, where Mike Schreiner has made a great breakthrough. And of course, this is the part of the country that I'm from where I have the deepest roots. So I would probably be inclined to run either in Southern Ontario or in the Montreal area. But at the end of the day, that's going to be a decision that's going to have to be made with the benefit of advice and careful consideration. And I certainly would want to be into Parliament as quickly as possible. I wouldn't want to linger out there as a seatless leader the way Jagmeet Singh did for some time. But I don't want to do anything precipitous either. So I think the decision would have to be done carefully and in consultation with others.
If just to close here, are there any other goals for the party? I mean, aside from winning seats, that you have that you feel either are starting to be addressed in this campaign or you would like to see addressed as this contest goes forward? I mean, what are those issues that you feel should be on the agenda for the Green Party right now?
One thing I've heard from quite a few people, particularly in the central part of the country, the eastern part of the country, is they felt somewhat disconnected from decisions about how to conduct past election campaigns. And so I really would like to find ways to get the membership and the regions of the country more involved, directly involved in determining an electoral strategy. I think it's very important for us to support our EDAs between elections. Somebody on my team looked at some numbers and we concluded that something in excess of 50% of the EDAs were not operational between elections. I think we have to do what we can to make them, and that's a very big challenge, especially with a small party, but make sure that they're alive and vibrant and active throughout the electoral cycle, not only when we're actually about to go to the polls. And I think that there is a strong desire also on the part of the members to see a higher level of transparency. So one thing that I'm a little bit concerned about is there's a lot of in-camera sessions on federal council. And I know some issues certainly need to be dealt with in camera, but I often hear people say, look, we'd like to know more about the all important deliberations of federal council. So that's something I think I'd like to try to address as well.
Dimitri, thank you so much for this.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, Joanne.
It's been great. Dimitri Lascaris is one of 9 contestants who's running to be leader of the Green Party of Canada. He's a lawyer, as I said, one of 3 lawyers in this contest. He specializes in class action and pro bono legal work. He's now based in Montreal, but ran for the Green Party in 2015 in London West. We will be interviewing all 9 contestants in this leadership race in both English and French. I'm Joanne Roberts. Thanks for listening. People, Politics and Planet is produced by the Green Party of Canada with technical assistance from JP Davidson at Pop-Up Podcasting.